Hey everybody, Eric Kaplan here, and welcome to the Short Game Masterclass. I'm joined by former #1 in the world, Luke Donald, who held that spot for 56 weeks, based upon not just great ball striking, but an absolute prowess around the green. I know that you led from 2009 to 2017, basically every short game stat known to man. I mean, first out of bunkers for a couple of years in there, so just absolutely astonishing. So when it comes to being a magician around the green, you certainly set a brand new standard. And so what we're gonna do together is we're gonna dive through a 3-part masterclass where we're gonna go into your head, what makes up your decisions, your techniques, and your artistry in terms of what makes up the chips and the pitches and the bunker shots that we've seen you hit, and really wow us all over the course of your career.
Yeah, well, thanks, Eric. I think the important thing when it comes to short game is understanding the correct technique. I think a lot of amateurs really struggle with that. They get things wrong. I play in lots of pro-ams every week, and you see the same mistakes over and over again. A lot of the amateurs get the ball kind of way far back in their stance. They lean the shaft, kind of get a little bit open in their stance usually. And again, you can create some good solid contact now and again, but you can't really get the ball up in the air, create spin, do any of those things. So really understanding the correct fundamentals is really imperative. One of the hardest shots, I think, for amateurs is the pitching, the chipping around the greens.
For sure.
It's not like a full swing where you can kind of just swing away without much thought. You've got to have a lot more technique, a lot more feel, a lot more finesse. But understanding the way it works is really important.
And so what we're going to dive into your techniques when it comes to what you do when you hit chips around the green. Then later on, we're going to talk about pitching and bunker play and everything else. But I do want to understand in terms of where everything started for you, in terms of where you felt like you developed, a lot of this short game prowess around the green.
Well, as a young kid, growing up in England, Seve was one of my idols. My very first golf course, a place called Hazelmere Golf Club, didn't have the greatest practice facilities, but I'd have friends that I'd practice with all day, every day until it was dark. And I'd put myself in positions that were very awkward and pretend that I was Seve. I mean, I just loved watching Seve, his flair, his imagination, how good he was around the greens. He was able to get the ball up and down from everywhere. So I'd put myself in those difficult situations. Again, I wasn't really thinking about technique then. I was just seeing the hole, seeing where the lie, assessing the lie, trying to figure out how to get those balls up and down the best way I can. And I think that gave me a lot of expertise. It built my short game in terms of my technique and my visualization and all that kind of things that go as being a kid and having that playful mindset. That's kind of where my short game started. And I've worked very hard on it as a pro as well.
Awesome. So let's go and walk through what are the fundamentals of hitting these solid chips that you've been hitting your entire career around the green. So what goes into your thought process regarding, or what before went through your thought process for you to be able to be a little bit more of an artist now regarding the techniques, the setup, the grip, and things like that anyone watching can certainly pick up on. And then from there, what I'd love to do with you is dive through the way that the wedge is designed optimally to work through different conditions. So if we are off of tight lies, against the grain, ball above versus ball below the feet, I think there's a lot of stuff that people can learn from you when it comes to creating more consistent contact with the back of the ball. By which you can get up and down a lot more often, because again, I can only imagine how many strokes somebody would save if they had your short game every single time they played.
Right. When it comes to short game, it's very situational. You're trying to pick the right shot for the right situation. We have pitching and chipping. I don't consider them the same. They're very different. If you have this kind of shot that we have presented here, this is pretty tight lie. It's a little bit into the grain because you're going uphill. But to this short flag here, you don't have a lot of green to work with, but it's uphill. So you can carry it onto the green and you want it to roll out like a putt. So that would be a chip for me. I want the ball to come out with top spin, end over end, and getting rolling towards the hole. That's how I feel like I'm gonna have the best chance of making this shot. If I was in the same situation, but it was downhill and I needed to get a little bit of grab on the ball, then I would go to a pitch shot.
Okay.
And different technique. I'm creating a little bit more spin, a little bit more check when it hits the ground, and so the ball doesn't get too far away from me when it's going down the hill.
Awesome. And so when it comes to the common mistakes that you feel amateurs make, moving the ball position back in their stance,
right,
what negative effect can that have on somebody's short game?
Well, especially on a shot like this where you're uphill into the grain, as soon as you move that ball position back, you're exposing the front edge of the club. So the sand wedge or your lob wedge here that I have has a very sharp front edge. but it has the bounce on the back, which is very smooth and glides through the grass nicely. It's designed to do that. So, you know, when you have a shot off a short shot like this on grass, you want that back edge gliding along the grass. As soon as you start adding angle to lean the shaft, you're exposing that front edge. It's going to get stuck in the ground. It's going to dig, especially into a grain like this.
For sure.
And it's going to compromise your strike pretty much.
Yep.
You're either going to hit it fat, or you know, you'll try and hit up on the ball, get the ball up in the air. You'll lean your center back and you'll hit it thin. Give yourself the best opportunity to get the best strike on this by proper setup fundamentals.
Awesome. And so let's have you hit a couple and kind of walk us through, you know, if we would go to this short pin here,
Yeah,
and then
so
we'll move on to some
I
different
probably
shots.
wouldn't use my 60 here. This is a chip up the hill. I don't have to get the ball spinning, as I said. I either use my 54, could even use the pitching wedge, but I'll start with my 54. Again, the way the club is designed has more bounce on the toe. The toe side tends to go through the grass nicely. The heel gets a little bit more stuck. So again, the more you lean shaft, the more you're exposing that front edge, that heel, it's gonna get dig. But this one, I want the ball, when it hits the ground, I want it to roll end over end towards the cup, just like a putt. So it's a little bit of a similar setup to how I would if I was just standing over here with a putter. I'm gonna get the ball a little bit more forward. Again, I want the center leaning just slightly to the left, pretty central, but I want this shaft nice and vertical, and I want the handle like leaning up a little bit. So I'm exposing the toe a little bit. And therefore there, it's just like rocking the shoulders. Again, I'm getting the toe of the club to slide. It's not going to dig too much and hit that grain so much. So it's going to slide through it.
I think that's extremely impactful, just being able to get the heel off the ground, exposing the part of the club that has more bounce.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely brilliant.
And a little bit more of a putting grip as well. I'm putting it more in my palms, less in the fingers. I'm not trying to create power here.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to rock my shoulders. So again, try and get the ball rolling end over end.
One time. So great shot there.
Who put the brake in there?
I know, it wasn't me. So let's talk a little bit in terms of, you know, let's say you're chipping a little bit more into the grain versus off of a tighter lie. And then we're gonna talk about uphill versus downhill and side hill lies, certainly. But what's your thought process when it comes to distance control? I mean, what do you do when it comes to visualizing the shot? I know that a lot of people out there might be subscribing to some sort of metronome technique or a clock technique. And I know that, as we talked about it earlier, you know, being too internal can turn off the creative part of the brain that allows us to really respond to what the golf course is giving you and executing, you know, what would be the perfect shot. I mean, one of the things that impressed me so much about our round together was you hit shots that, again, I couldn't even dreamt could even be pulled off. And so to see those happen with such ease, for me, it really blew my mind, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this with you and share really with the world what goes on in your head in terms of hitting these shots. And even right there, you know, learning that the toe of the club has more bounce, I think is going to help absolutely everybody.
Absolutely. You know, when it comes to judging distances, again, I'm not really thinking about a clock system or anything like that. As I said, that gets me too much focused inside, where I'm not using my visuals, my eyes, everything intuitive that makes anyone really know how to do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first thing is really important is to get that technique down, so you can get the proper strike, you can get the proper launch, how much spin you want to create. But from then, it just becomes about using your eyes really to gauge that distance. You know, if I was to pick up this ball and try and throw it in that bunker, that trap over there, I wouldn't have any thought. I would just pick it up and do it. You know, we're all programmed to be able to do that stuff. So again, once you have your technique down, you want to use your eyes to really get those visuals down and create the feel that way.
I think that a lot of amateurs, they get so fixated based upon the technique themselves. They don't really allow themselves to access, you know, that higher way of thinking around the green, so to speak. Right. And so let's go ahead and have you hit a couple when it comes to what would you do to gauge distance to that second and maybe even that third pin back there.
Yeah, maybe even go down to a pitching wedge. You know, again, this would be a pretty much a chip shot. I've got plenty of green to work with. It's not really getting away from me. Just going to, again, use my visuals, use my good setup. I'm going to get the handle nice and high, expose that toe a little bit. Again, just a few practice swings just to really feel the shot. Kind of have a visual of where I want to land it, seeing the shot roll out towards the hole. Again, I've got that good setup, those good fundamentals, and then really use my eyes just to see it and feel it. And again, perfectly pin high.
And again, I know that
3 feet. I'm going to get up and down, and that's the way you can really shave strokes off your handicap. You know,
for sure.
Taking care of those little things that we all should be able to do, but we find it hard.
Yeah, and I think that, taking the time to go through and learn, about the fundamentals is certainly important so that you could free up the mind in order to hit shots like that. And again, I know that you led the tour in proximity to the hole inside of 30 yards, and it's very clear to see why. Let's go and put your game to the test a little bit and say, what would you do to that back pin over there? Yeah.
I mean, you have different options. You could try and fly it a little bit further.
Yeah.
Looks like about 40 yards. I could just do a regular kind of long pitch shot, I suppose, where it'd have a little bit of bite at the end of it. Or I could do the chip shot and get it to roll out. I think from a safety standpoint and probably the best percentage wise, you want that ball rolling out as much as possible. The 40-yard pitch is a little bit more of a higher tariff, a higher higher difficulty level. But again, be a similar thing. But again, I'm just using my eyes now. So the length of swing is going to be a little bit longer. I'm trying to see where I want it to land. Using my visuals, get that good technique, lean a little bit left. Rolling out towards the hole.
That goes in, we're leaving.
Yeah, it's a little long, but
great shot. So Luke, I know that a lot of people, when they are working on the fundamentals, they practice, off of very, very flat conditions. And unfortunately, the golf course doesn't necessarily give you that all the time. So what's your thought process when you are faced with, different lies of conditions, whether it be ball above versus ball below your feet, uphill versus downhill, and then, very tight lies, and as well as against the grain? What goes on in your head regarding the way you change your setup or anything about your technique to give you the best opportunity for a consistent strike?
Yeah, lots of little checkpoints. I'll go through a few of them. Maybe start with ball above my feet. Ball above my feet, I tend to move the ball position back just ever so slightly, just because the more you get the ball above your feet, the more the loft wants to point to the left. So moving it back in the stance tends to square the loft a little bit more.
For sure.
Again, everything changes kind of similar. You always want to angle your body with the slope as much as possible. So, with a ball above your feet, you want a little bit more squat, a little bit more knee bend. Ball below your feet, you want the opposite, actually.
Interesting.
You want your knees a little bit straighter, a little bit more tip over the ball, so you're angling your spine with the slope. And ball below your feet, you want to move the ball up a little bit more in your stance. So
based on the fact the face wants to point a little bit more open.
Wants to point a bit more open, but it's also important to try and get the sole of the club to be properly on the grass. So again, if you start getting the ball above your feet, ball below your feet, you're going to tend to have your hands kind of reaching under lower.
For sure.
And you got to get those hands a little bit higher to sole the club more.
So I think
it
that's
really helps with where the loft is pointing.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, because a lot of the time, somebody will have a ball that's below their feet and they'll feel that toe, start to be the only thing that's exposed with the turf, and they're curious in terms of why the club always digs on them. And then the face can do funny things from there. And so, just the idea that, with the ball being below your feet, being a little bit more over it perhaps, and as well as creating, the handle getting up a little bit higher. I think it's absolutely brilliant in terms of being able to sole the club for consistent strikes, really.
Yeah, we always know with ball below the feet that the ball is going to tend to want to cut a little bit more. The path is going to be a little bit more left.
Yeah.
Because you want to put the ball position forward. It's going to open the shoulder slightly. But if you do that and keep your hands low, as we know, the more you put the hands low, the loft is going to point left. So suddenly you're expecting this ball to cut, and it's going to go dead straight or pull on you. So
yeah, which you certainly don't want if you want to get up and down. And so to just recap that, when you have a ball that is a little bit more above your feet, the thought process is move the ball position back a little bit. You're going to go ahead and drop the handle down a little bit lower.
The handle a little bit lower.
For sure. And then if you're hitting a chip, the chipping technique stays the same, but those are your checkpoints there. And likewise, if a ball is below your feet, you might try to get over it a little bit more and then pick the handle up so that the sole is properly against the ground, because, one of the things we see out of you is being as good as you are around the green. Again, you led the tour basically 10 straight years in every short game stat, to be able to get those little check marks that have certainly separated, you from everyone else on tour perhaps, but also things that will help anyone watching this get up and down a little bit more often.
Yeah. Yeah, with pitching and chipping, we know that there's more dig on the heel, and more slide on the toe, more bounce. So again, if you get those hands down too much and expose that heel, it's going to catch this grass pretty badly, and it's going to make strike really hard.
For sure. And so what about if you have a ball, that you're hitting up the hill versus down the hill? What would be your thought process there?
Yeah, ball position, going up the hill. I think more importantly is you really want to just angle your body with the slope so much. You do want to still feel like a little bit more weight's on your left going up the hill, but angling your body with the slope, just working your way along the slope, I think is the most important thing when it comes to uphill and downhill.
And so if you're downhill, you'd angle it down the slope.
Down the slope.
Would you do that by?
You always want to chase the ball down.
For sure.
In short game, I think too many amateurs are trying to like loft the club up. And get the ball up in the air, and they tilt their spine to the right, their angle, their center gets way behind the ball,
and the bottom of the arc is back there,
bottoming the club too far behind the ball.
So when it comes to if you're hitting a shot off the downslope, maybe even that direction, you would try to do the same thing.
Yeah, moving down. I'd even put the ball position a little bit forward, so it's going to
encourage me forward.
Yeah, encourage me to move down the hill with it.
Interesting, because again, if somebody tries to help it and they all float back, they're turning 3 into 6.
I think you want to create enough. You want to put yourself in a position to instinctively do what you need to do, and that's go down the hill. And I think if you have a downhill shot and you put the ball back, suddenly you don't feel like you have enough loft, and so to get it up, you're going to move away from it.
And that's going to, of course, create the inconsistency of the strike and not allow people at home to develop a short game that you certainly possess, which I think will be very, very helpful. And so, again, I think that this analysis, so to speak, of this examination of your short game, not only will help everyone watching, develop a more consistent fundamental technique, but these small checkpoints, I certainly think, have served to separate you from perhaps everyone else on tour, when you certainly led the tour in every short game stat, and being able to learn from that and from you, for me, is insightful and, quite frankly, from what I'm hearing, absolutely genius. So thanks so much for being here. Look forward to diving into pitching as well as bunker play with you.
Great.